I never thought the skills that once made me a ghost in the shadows of foreign deserts would be the same ones I'd used to burn down a criminal empire in my own backyard. But when they took everything I lived for, they didn't realize they'd left the one person alive who knew exactly how to dismantle them piece by piece. My name is Elias, and for 12 years I operated in a world most people only see in movies, specializing in unconventional warfare and structural destabilization. But none of that mattered until the day the Jalisco Vanguard cartel decided my family's small ranch was the perfect transit point for their poison. I lost my wife, Clara, and our 7-year-old son, Leo, because I refused to sign over a piece of land that had been in my family for 3 generations. And now I'm sitting in the ruins of my home, asking you one simple thing. If you had the power to systematically erase the people who destroyed your soul, would you stop until there was nothing left but ash? Or would you let the system fail you one last time? Tell me in the comments if you think I went too far, because by the time I was finished, there wasn't a single person left to tell my side of the story. It all started 6 months ago when the quiet life I had fought so hard to build began to fracture. After retiring from the service, I wanted nothing more than to hear the sound of the wind through the brush and the laughter of my son playing in the dirt. We lived on a sprawling 300-acre ranch near the border, a place of peace that I thought was far enough away from the chaos of my past. But the geography that gave us peace also made us a target. A local representative of the cartel, a man named Mateo, who hid his cruelty behind expensive suits and a silver tongue, approached me with an offer to buy the northern ridge of my property. I knew what that ridge was. It was a blind spot in the surveillance grid, a perfect corridor for moving illicit cargo undetected. I told him to leave and never come back. I thought my firm stance would be the end of it, but in that world, a no is just an invitation for escalation. They started small, cutting fences, poisoning a few head of cattle. But I didn't budge. I documented everything and went to the local sheriff, only to find that his silence had already been bought and paid for. That's when I realized I was on my own. The night it happened, I was out in the barn fixing a generator when the world turned into a nightmare. I heard the screech of tires and the heavy thud of boots, and before I could reach the house, the night was lit up by the orange glow of a Molotov cocktail. I ran, my heart hammering against my ribs, but I was too late. They didn't just want the land anymore. They wanted to send a message to anyone else who thought they could stand in their way. I saw the black SUV peeling away, the dust settling in the moonlight, and I heard the silence where there should have been screams. I pulled Clara and Leo from the wreckage, but the smoke had already claimed them. In that moment, the man I had spent years trying to bury, the operator who could look at a map and see only vulnerabilities, came back to life. I didn't go to the funeral to mourn, I went to plan. I spent the next 3 weeks in a state of cold, calculated fury, using my old contacts to track the hierarchy of the Jalisco Vanguard. I needed to know every link in the chain, from the low-level enforcers who threw the fire to the boss, a man known only as El Martillo, who sat in a fortified villa 40 miles across the line. I began my campaign not with a bang, but with a whisper. I knew that a direct assault on a cartel stronghold was suicide, even for someone with my training. Instead, I used the principles of asymmetric warfare to turn their own strengths against them. My first target was their logistics. I knew their routes, their timing, and their vulnerabilities. I spent nights perched on ridges with a long-range thermal optic, mapping their movements. I didn't just intercept their shipments. I sabotaged them in ways that bred internal suspicion. I replaced Hive, Al, you cargo with GPS trackers and let the shipments reach their destination, only to have them raided by rival factions I had tipped off anonymously. Within a month, El Martillo began to believe he had a mole in his inner circle. Paranoia is a powerful weapon when wielded correctly. I watched through a drone feed as he began executing his own lieutenants, thinning his own ranks out of fear. But that was just the beginning. I needed to hit their wallet, and I knew exactly where they kept their liquid assets. By the second month, the cartel was hemorrhaging money and trust. I had moved into a hidden basement beneath a collapsed barn on the edge of town, surrounded by monitors, topographic maps, and the tools of my former trade. I was no longer a grieving father. I was a ghost haunting their operations. I intercepted their encrypted communications, learning the names of the corrupt officials who protected them. One by one, I leaked evidence of their bribery to the federal authorities who couldn't be bought, creating a vacuum of power that left the cartel exposed. Mateo, the man who had first threatened me, was the first major domino to fall. I didn't kill him. That would have been too easy. Instead, I waited until he was transporting a massive cash payment to the border, and disabled his vehicle with a precision EMP device I'd rigged. When his guards fled the ghost, attacking them, I stepped out of the shadows. I didn't say a word about the land or the fire. I just took the money and left him tied to a fence post with a sign around his neck that detailed every shipment he'd ever skimmed from El Martillo. The cartel found him before the sun came up, and his end was far more brutal than anything I would have done. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. I was successfully tearing them apart from the inside out, but the risk was growing every day. I had already taken out their logistics and their local muscle, but the head of the snake was still alive in his villa, surrounded by a small army. I knew that if I continued, there was no turning back. I was either going to finish this or die trying. Before I tell you how I breached the most secure compound in the region and what I did when I finally stood face to face with the man who killed my family, I want you to pause and comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have been satisfied with the chaos I'd already caused? Or would you have gone all the way to the top, knowing you might never come back? I need to know if I'm the only one who thinks this level of justice was necessary. The final phase of my plan required me to be more than just a ghost. I had to be a force of nature. I knew El Martillo's villa was an old colonial estate with thick walls and a single main gate, guarded by 20 men around the clock. But every fortress has a weakness, and his was the very thing that kept him comfortable: the underground water and power lines. For 3 days, I worked on a series of improvised explosive devices and cyber attacks. At exactly 2:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, I triggered a localized blackout while simultaneously flooding the villa's basement levels. In the confusion, the guards scrambled to the backup generators, which I had already rigged with thermite. When the generators blew, the entire compound was plunged into total darkness and chaos. I moved in through the drainage tunnels I'd mapped out, wearing night vision goggles that turned the world into a haunting shade of green. To them, I was a phantom. I moved through the halls with a suppressed rifle, taking out guards with surgical precision. I wasn't there to clear the building. I was there for one man. I found El Martillo in his panic room, a reinforced bunker that he thought was impenetrable. He didn't realize that the electronic locks were tied to the main server I had just fried. I used a small, shaped charge to breach the door, and the overpressure knocked him flat on his back. When he looked up and saw me standing there, he didn't see a soldier. He saw a man with nothing left to lose. He tried to offer me money, millions of dollars, everything he had. I didn't want his money. I sat him down and showed him the photos of Clara and Leo. I made him look at them for a long time, explaining exactly who they were and what they meant to the world. I told him that he hadn't just stolen a piece of land, he had ended a future. Then, I did something he didn't expect. I didn't pull the trigger. Instead, I handed him a phone. On the screen was a live feed of his entire empire crumbling, his warehouses being raided by federals I'd tipped off, his bank accounts being drained into anonymous charities, and his remaining men fleeing for their lives. I told him that death was too kind for him. I left him there in the dark, stripped of his power, his wealth, and his dignity, knowing that the rival cartels he'd betrayed would be through those doors within the hour. I walked out of that villa as the sun began to rise, the smoke from the generators drifting into the morning air. I had dismantled the Jalisco Vanguard not with a war of attrition, but with a masterclass in psychological and structural destruction. The aftermath was a media frenzy. The mysterious collapse of one of the region's most feared cartels dominated the headlines for weeks. The corrupt sheriff was arrested, and the land they tried to steal was eventually turned into a memorial park dedicated to the victims of cartel violence. I disappeared shortly after, moving further into the mountains where nobody knows my name or my past. I still wake up at night hearing the fire, but there is a quietness now that wasn't there before. I did what the law couldn't, using the very skills that were meant to protect a country, to protect a memory. It wasn't about revenge in the end. It was about making sure that the monsters who think they are untouchable realize that there is always someone, somewhere, who knows how to break them. What I did wasn't legal, and some might even say it wasn't moral. But when the world you live in is broken, you have to decide if you're going to be a victim or the person who fixes it. I chose to be the one who stood up, and while it didn't bring my family back, it ensured that no other family on that ridge would ever have to go through what mine did. I hope my story serves as a reminder that the most dangerous person in the world is the one who has been pushed too far and has the patience to wait for the right moment to strike. If you believe that justice should be served by any means necessary when the system fails, then this story was for you. I've told you my truth, and now I'm back in the shadows where I belong. Like this video if you think I did the right thing by taking matters into my own hands, and make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next time a story like this needs to be told. I want to hear your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Was I a hero or just another shadow in a dark world? Your engagement helps us bring more of these intense, real, life accounts to light. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I'll see you all in the next story.